Itachi versus Pain. By far the most heated and probably the most controversial debate in the Naruto fandom. The main reason being because of how powerful each character is in their own right. However, I've taken it upon myself to answer and give an objective analysis on who would actually win if these two fought. Now, as you can tell by the title and thumbnail, I do think there is a very clear winner in this fight, and as I cover more and more of each character's scaling, it should become pretty apparent as well. But of course, I will still give both characters a fair shake, and try to scale them to where I believe to be the most reasonable interpretation of their power. The video will be broken down into multiple parts with me covering scaling and statements for each character, then debunking some misconceptions regarding some statements, and then finally answering who wins and why. Before we begin though, I want to clarify that this video will not cover Edo versus Edo. That's a topic for another day, so we will be excluding their feats from these states. So let's begin the video by scaling Itachi. Now, unlike Pain, Itachi is well established to be a powerhouse right from part 1. Initially, we don't know much outside of the fact that he slaughtered the Uchiha clan and that Sasuke aims to take him down one day. That would all change in chapter 140 where Orochimaru would quite plainly state, "He is stronger than I." These words, although very few, tell us all we need to know. Itachi is very strong. Orochimaru had just gone through a battle with the third Hokage and arguably even won that battle. And there are a myriad of statements for both Orochimaru and Hiruzen, placing them both at the peak of the verse up to this point in time. So needless to say, this statement is very telling for Itachi. The following chapters show us a lot more of Itachi as we finally get to see Itachi in action. Now, most of his showings are not exactly remarkable, mainly because it's against characters like Kurenai and Kakashi, who are not necessarily weak. They're still quite clearly below that Sannin Hokage level of power, and by a good bit as well. Itachi would take no time in showing the true power of the Uchiha by showing his Mangekyo Sharingan, and with it, the Tsukuyomi. Now, the Tsukuyomi is one of the three main abilities of the Mangekyo Sharingan that Itachi wields, and we'll get into the other two later, but for now I want to go over the Tsukuyomi as it is an insanely overpowered jutsu. The Tsukuyomi allows Itachi to have complete control over this nightmarish realm, and even allows him to manipulate time and space as he sees fit. Even though Kakashi had spent 72 hours in the Tsukuyomi, it was just mere moments in the actual world. The databook also heavily implies that the Tsukuyomi is essentially instantaneous, as it describes it as sending your opponent into the dream realm the very moment they are exposed to the Mangekyo Sharingan. Kakashi even comments how Itachi could have very easily killed him if he wanted to. Now this will segue into us analyzing Itachi's character and his true motives in the story. You see, the thing with Itachi is that in almost all of his encounters, Itachi isn't actually trying his hardest against his opponents, because of the fact that he isn't actually a villain of the Leaf, but rather an ally to it. This is a pretty important thing to note when scaling Itachi, as a lot of people would dishonestly try to downplay some things surrounding Itachi as well as ignore context. This is most prevalent in the following chapter when Itachi encounters Jiraiya. Itachi states that if he and Jiraiya were to fight, they would both end up hurting each other very badly. This would seemingly imply that Jiraiya and Itachi are relative to one another. However, I obviously take issue with this. Firstly is, like I mentioned earlier, we know that Itachi is actually an ally of the Leaf and doesn't want to kill people from the Leaf. In fact, he wants to protect them. It's later revealed that the real reason he was actually there that day was merely to remind Danzo that he was still alive so his brother would remain protected. So again, a lot of this is simply just for show. If Itachi were to kill Jiraiya, there would be nothing from stopping him from taking the Nine Tails, and obviously Itachi doesn't want the Leaf to lose such a valuable asset. So instead, he has to basically play up Jiraiya's strength so that Kisame doesn't get suspicious of Itachi. Another thing is that Itachi just very blatantly scales above the Sannin. Like Orochimaru blatantly states that Itachi is above him, and it's stated not only in the data books but in the manga that the Sannin are very much relative to one another, meaning that Itachi should quite comfortably scale over Jiraiya. It's even worse when we see the first fight between Orochimaru and Itachi literally no-diss him even without the Mangekyo Sharingan. So it's pretty clear that Orochimaru is vastly below the likes of Itachi, and thus Jiraiya would be as well. This is even further corroborated by Kisame, who claims that Itachi should very well be capable of defeating Jiraiya even by himself. The next time we see Itachi fight is when he encounters Kakashi again, as well as Naruto and Chio. However, this fight is only a 30% clone of Itachi, and it's so weak in fact that he literally cannot use the Mangekyo Sharingan. So honestly, this isn't really worthy of going over, However, Itachi does display the ability of using Genjutsu with his finger here, which is obviously pretty powerful. However, Chiyo and Kakashi seem to think that fighting with multiple people is a good way of dealing with non-MS based Genjutsu, and seeing as he's going up against 6 people, I find it really hard to believe that it'll be that much effective in this fight. The most important section of Itachi Scaling would come in his final fight against Sasuke. Now, this fight also has an asterisk next to it, because of the fact that, once again, Itachi is not trying to kill Sasuke. This is verbatim told and confirmed to be the case that Itachi was indeed holding back, and all of Sasuke's moves were accounted for and planned for by Itachi. So in essence, Heavy Sasuke is far below the likes of Itachi. Another one of the things about this fight is the very crucial reveal of Itachi's sickness. Now, I think it's pretty obvious to most that the sickness very negatively affects Itachi. However, Zetsu just outright states how unusual Itachi is moving due to the sickness he's afflicted with. And I mean, I'd imagine fighting with the illness and performing at 100% is nearly impossible. So suffice to say, this sickness is a pretty big deal when talking about a live Itachi. Once again in this fight, Itachi used the Tsukuyomi and it takes a lot out of him. I mean, we literally see him sweating and his eyesight is very blurry. And it's pretty heavily implied that his movements are dulled even after one usage of the Tsukuyomi. So again, this is a pretty big deal when talking about Itachi and how much of a double-edged sword this Genjutsu is. It's not enough to stop him from continuing a fight, but it's still something I should mention. After this, Itachi would use the second of his Mangekyo abilities, and that is the Amaterasu. Now, the Amaterasu is pretty damn powerful. Like, it's stated to be the highest form of fire style, and its most notable attribute is that it's almost completely unextinguishable, and it will continue to burn until the target is no more. So if this thing lands, it's pretty much game over. Now, the final and definitely the most important of the Mangekyo abilities is the Susanoo. After Sasuke wastes up all of his chakra on Kirin, Orochimaru is able to break free from Sasuke's body and transforms into his Hydra state, which is stated to be the most powerful jutsu and his most powerful form, meaning that this is essentially the peak of Orochimaru's capabilities. You know, similar to Sage Mode and 100 Healings, Orochimaru has a Snake Hydra mode, and Itachi just easily bodies him, like a literal blitz in one shot. And it's also revealed that Itachi possesses the spiritual weapons, the Totsuka Blade, and the Yata Mirror. This is actually the first time in the series where we see the full power of Itachi. So let's talk about the Susanoo for a minute because, like I said earlier, it is essentially the most powerful of the Mangekyo abilities, and it's by far the most important tool in Itachi's kit. Now, the third databook goes in extensive detail about the Susanoo and what it's truly capable of doing. A godlike technique, used only by those who have achieved mastery beyond the Mangekyo Sharingan, a jutsu feared by those around him as the most powerful of the ocular jutsu. It is the caster's guardian deity, and at the same time can consume the caster as well. The databook goes on to further describe it as chakra taking form of a formidable looking warrior whose rampaging soul will not settle down until it has destroyed all enemies before him. The Susanoo boasts an absolutely perfect attack and defense because of the spirit weapons it wields in both hands. The 10-handed sword that can cut down any enemy in its right, and the Yata Mirror, a shield that can repel any attack. In the face of a god's powers, all attacks, whether from a material or astral body, ninjutsu or physical, lose their meaning. Now, the two main attributes of Itachi Susanoo in specific is the fact that he wields the Yata Mirror and the Totsuka Blade. The Totsuka Blade essentially being the sword that is imbued with sealing jutsu and essentially puts anybody it pierces into a drunken dreamlike world. The Yata Mirror is another spiritual weapon that essentially allows it to alter its attributes to essentially match the attack that it's being brought up against, and thus render the attack ineffective. Meaning that if Itachi is using the Yata Mirror, it's pretty much impossible to get a clean hit on him. And of course, if he pierces you with the Totsuka Blade, it's pretty much over. You're sealed forever, essentially. So with all the hype and statements surrounding the Susanoo, it's pretty clear how devastating this ability is, and it definitely poses a big problem for Pain once he uses it. So yeah, the Susanoo is definitely overpowered. The last bit of scaling I want to talk about in regards to Itachi is how he fares against characters past his fight with Sasuke. Mainly how he stacks up against Sasuke himself in his later forms. The main reason I bring this up is because of a statement made in Data Before, where it's stated that Sasuke's dojutsu abilities as well as his jutsu actually surpassed that of Itachi's when he gained the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Obviously, since he had surpassed him with the EMS, this would imply that prior to this, Sasuke wasn't actually on Itachi's level yet, meaning that Itachi should scale over the likes of Sasuke with just his regular Mangekyo Sharingan. Now, MS Sasuke is pretty impressive for a multitude of reasons, but the main point I want to focus on is that it's stated if Naruto were to fight MS Sasuke, they would both end up dying. This is even elaborated on in the databook as both Sasuke and Naruto having mutual thoughts of death if they were to fight. This would mean that MS Sasuke at this point scales to Sage Naruto. Obviously, if Naruto was gonna die and Sasuke was gonna die, they would at least have to have some capabilities of killing one another, which would imply relativity as combatants. And since Itachi scales over Sasuke, at least until he gets his EMS, Itachi would also scale over the likes of Sage Naruto. That should pretty much round out all relevant things in regards to Itachi scaling, so with all of that out of the way, let's move on to Pain. Now, scaling Pain is actually fairly different from the likes of Itachi, mainly because a lot of Pain's power comes from the narrative surrounding it. The main theme you'll notice for Pain is how unbeatable and invincible he is. The databook goes on to call him an invincible god, as well as the invincible leader of the Akatsuki, who wields power that no one can deny. Pain is also a pretty complex character due to the variety of abilities he has. He's probably the most contrived character in that sense, so we'll go into his abilities as they pop up in the series. So let's start by going over the first time we see Pain in action, and that's in his fight against Jiraiya. Now, similar to Itachi, Pain also goes up against another of the Sannin, and obviously goes on to beat that said Sannin. The fight with Jiraiya starts off with Pain only utilizing one of his paths, that being the Animal Path. The Animal Path is definitely one of the more powerful paths due to how incredibly versatile it is just by itself. The Animal Path, like the name suggests, allows him to summon a multitude of creatures that all do various things, such as the chameleon that can turn invisible or the endless multi-headed hound that can't be killed. This Pain alone was pretty much soloing Jiraiya and forced him to go into Sage mode, so even just this one path of Pain is obviously pretty damn powerful on its own. The Animal Path would then go on to summon two more paths, the Predator Path and then the Human Path. It then quickly becomes very clear why Pain is so insanely powerful and very tricky to deal with. You see, one of the biggest problems when fighting Pain is the insane amount of battlefield coverage he gets. This allows him to see things and plan accordingly a lot faster than he normally would be able to. It acts as a sort of precog similar to that of the Sharingan, so much so that without this added vision, Sage Jiraiya is blatantly able to blitz the Human Path. Then once the Animal Path and Predator Path gain more field of vision, the Human Path is able to point blank block a punch from Sage Jiraiya. I and Pod go as far as to call it an unbeatable combo, and going forward in literally every fight with Pain, reducing the amount of vision he has is one of the bigger priorities when fighting him. Just the three of these paths were so strong that Jiraiya thought he was gonna straight up die if he continued to fight them, due to their coordination and how well they were countering his attacks. While we're on the subject, let's talk about the other two paths that appear, starting with the Predator Path. The Predator Path has a very simple yet extremely effective ability to absorb ninjutsu. So if this path is up, using ninjutsu is virtually useless. You're essentially just throwing away chunks of chakra for nothing. The Predator Path itself is actually rather underrated in terms of his physical capabilities, and I say that because he was able to react to a blitz attempt from Sage Jiraiya, and then literally grabs the Odama Rasengan in his palms before absorbing it. The next path summoned is the Human Path, and in this fight specifically, the Human Path is pretty much worthless. I think that's just due to how busted its ability is, that being the ability to rip a soul from one's body. Now, probably for plot reasons, this path doesn't ever use that jutsu on Jiraiya, however it's definitely still one of Pain's win cons and a pretty powerful one at that. After Jiraiya mistakenly thinks he's defeated Pain, he's then surprised to find out that not only did they not die, but there are 6 of them as well. And this short-sightedness would lead to the death of Jiraiya. After the death of Jiraiya, Naruto would go on to train in the same Sage mode as his master in hopes of surpassing him and utilizing it to take down Pain. And while Naruto is away at Mount Miyaboku, Pain would invade Konoha in his hunt for Naruto. This would lead to the other 3 paths getting their time to shine, but most notably the Tendo path, but we'll get into him in a little bit. Starting with the Naraka path, it has the ability to summon the King of Hell, which allows him to interrogate people, but more importantly, it allows him to completely heal and even revive other fallen paths of Pain. The databook goes as far as to say because of this immortality, that Pain is simply unbeatable. So suffice to say, this path is very much a threat in battle if you don't take him out early. The next path is the Asura path, and this path allows Pain to utilize weapons that haven't even been developed yet in the ninja world. This Path of Pain was able to completely tear off the arm of Sage Jiraiya and even blatantly outspeeds Kakashi's Raikiri in order to protect Tendo. Speaking of him though, the final and by far the most powerful Path of Pain is of course Tendo. He has the ability to push and pull in very simple terms. The Tendo Path has by far the best showings, but his main one at this point is pretty much fighting Kakashi one-on-one, and although Kakashi doesn't really get destroyed all that quickly, I would like to point out that Pain is clearly trying to extract intel from Kakashi, so he could very well not be going all out at this point. And then as soon as the Asura Path joins the fight, Kakashi just verbatim says he cannot beat them. Pain would then go on a kill streak and earn himself a chopper gunner by taking out the likes of Choza, Shizune, and then of course even Kakashi. This would lead to yet another statement saying that Pain is invincible. Then in probably the rawest moment in Naruto, Pain would destroy all of Konoha in one fell swoop with his chaotic almighty push. The havoc Pain caused would result in Naruto returning, and thus the battle between Pain and Naruto would begin. Now, to be honest, this fight is actually very contentious, as a lot of people either downplay Pain or downplay Naruto's performance in this fight. However, I think the main thing that should be noted is that Pain isn't exactly at full power here, mainly in reference to the Tendo Path not having access to his abilities. I bring this up because it's actually heavily implied that when all 6 paths are active is when Pain is actually at his strongest, and obviously the most powerful of the paths is unable to use his ability. So I do think the fight definitely would have ended quicker if Tendo had access to his main ability. This is further corroborated by statements saying Pain's ability surpasses that of Sage Naruto, and Naruto just flat out admitting he can't beat the Tendo Path without Frog Song, implying his Taijutsu and Ninjutsu are not enough. Of course, this would lead Pain into pushing Naruto into the Six-Tail transformation, and even still, at least in terms of speed, Pain is still able to keep up with and even react to this version of Naruto. However, now that he has access to his tails and obviously got a huge amp, he's able to repel the Shinra Tensei back at Pain. After using his Biju Bomb on Pain, this would force Pain to use his final and most ultimate technique, the Chibaku Tensei. The Chibaku Tensei is by far Pain's most powerful ability, and what it does essentially is summon a black sphere that has a gravitational pull that will pull in a bunch of rocks and debris to then seal its opponent in. We even see that Six-Tailed Naruto actually shoots a Biju Bomb at it, and it does virtually no damage, so the jutsu is actually pretty durable as well. However, right when he summons it is when he starts to feel the effects of his fatigue due to how hard he's been pushing himself this whole time, and it eventually falls apart. This of course will lead to Pain's eventual defeat, so with that pretty much concludes all of Pain's scaling. Now on to what everybody's been waiting for: who wins this fight and why? Now, if it hasn't been made obvious yet, I'll just come out and say it. I do think Pain wins this fight. The reason is simply just due to the sheer amount of statements that assert at this point in time no one can beat Pain and that Pain is invincible. And I want to stress that "at this point in time" bit. You see, a lot of people will be very dishonest and just outright ignorantly claim that the statements are false because Pain was beaten by Naruto. Now, I can't believe that I had to actually explain context, but for the sake of covering all bases, I will. The thing is that people will view statements in the context of a completed story. However, the important thing to note is that when these statements are made, the series isn't actually completed yet. So obviously, if you look at it in today's lens, you will see a lot of contradictions. However, Kishimoto is not accounting for these more powerful individuals when making these statements. The back of the databook specifies that it's only covering up to volume 43 or up to chapter 402. This databook does not cover the Pain arc. In fact, if you actually look at the databook page for Sage Mode, you will see that Naruto is not listed as a user yet. So trying to use things that had not happened yet to debunk this is completely wrong and literally the opposite of how the databooks are written. Yes, more powerful characters who would most likely beat Pain do exist. However, these characters did not exist at this time. However, this does not mean at this point in time Pain wasn't the most powerful. You want to know who does exist at this time and is included in this databook? Itachi. Hell, he even has an entire section for himself. The fact of the matter is that there are simply far too many statements that put Pain on a higher pedestal than his peers. Even if you think some of them are hyperbolic, Itachi doesn't get nearly as much or really any at all comparable statements. So if Itachi was really more powerful than Pain, why is Pain receiving these narrative implications and not Itachi? Well, the answer is simply because Itachi is not on that level. Another thing to note here is that even feat-wise, there's really nothing Itachi does that would suggest he would defeat Pain. Itachi does have good scaling, but it's really nothing Pain doesn't also scale to. Like Itachi can defeat Asani, well, so can Pain. Itachi scales over Sage Naruto, well, so does Pain. And that's really the main issue with taking Itachi's side in this fight, is that nothing he does outweighs the narrative for Pain, and it doesn't contradict it either, so it should still follow. The narrative simply leans too strongly in Pain's favor, with it being stated numerous, and I really do mean numerous times, that Pain is unbeatable and far too powerful for anyone as it stands. Meaning that simply put, Pain is too powerful for Itachi to handle, and thus Pain would absolutely defeat Itachi. Thank you all for watching this through the end. I already know this is going to be a controversial one, but that's just due to the nature of the topic. Feel free to let me know what you disagree with in the comments below, of course. And outside of that, I want to ask that y'all like the video and subscribe to the channel to show some support. Thank you again, and goodbye.